just how I'm feeling, though I never wanted you another way. But baby, it's been on my mind, and you know my face can't hide it. So take my hand and hear me when I say, don't you know that I'll be there for you, with a love to get you through the night, yeah. And I'll be there for you when everything is out of sight. You got it, baby. One more time, you got to get it right and forget what it's like for you. And honey, if you're not, then I'ma get you by. Then come on, baby, not.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 75 of the Adam Makes Beer podcast, coming to you from the depths of the greater Cincinnati area. It is the recipe writing AMA podcast. I've been tweaking the Q&A podcast. I'm going with AMA a little bit. We'll see. Ask me anything, baby. Good call. Recipe writing questions, hit me up. Get in the chat, whether it be on Instagram or on anything. What up, Jamie Tripp? Good to see you in here, man. Drop those questions, okay? All questions welcome, but recipe questions are the big theme. Check out the playlist tab on Adam Makes Beer. No, on the Adam Makes Beer YouTube channel. Check it out. Dig in there. There is all sorts of stuff. Tutorials, questions, answers, all sorts of things. Get it. Awesome stuff in there. Just a reminder, my full-time job is bringing you educational brewing content. So if you're getting any value and have the means, please consider a channel membership for less than a cup of coffee a month. Shout out to all my wonderful channel sponsors. You guys help to keep the lights on around here. Also, sharing all of my Instagram stuff, anything you see across social media, sharing that stuff is also a big help. Very much appreciated. If you are interested, it is the join button on the Adam Makes Beer YouTube page. Speaking of which, jump onto that page and you will see my throwback Amber Lager brew day, all compiled with some edits, some interesting stuff from my time back at the Ridge. That's what I call cartridge. Back at the Ridge. Speaking of the Ridge, what about South Ridge? I was just there with my boy Alex Reinhardt at South Ridge Brewing just a short week ago, doing up a video and where we brewed chestnut beer. Getting them chestnuts in there, son. South Ridge Brewing in Wilmington, Ohio. You don't want to miss my interview with the wonderful Jennifer Talley. And speaking of wonderful folks, next week on Monday, the 27th, I'm going to be talking to Jeffrey Wright. If you do not know Jeffrey, he is popping on Instagram. I've seen he's had several memes that have really blown up. I think he's got some stuff with millions of views on there. If you are in the craft beer brewer space at all, on that app, I'm assuming you have seen his stuff because the algorithm knows what it's doing. So that stuff will be coming up, so keep an eye out for that. Also, Brewers of PA are hosting the Mid-Atlantic Brewer Symposium and Expo in Harrisburg, PA, November 2nd through 4th. Listen, you need to be there. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be talking. I'm going to be listening. We're going to have some beverages. I'll probably go to bed early. You know how it goes. Okay? We live that life. That crazy 48-year-old brewer life where you go to bed early and start to really miss my family before I'm really gone from them. That's typically my path. But you do not want to miss this. Get on Brewers of PA. Maybe it's .org. I'm not certain, but Brewers of PA on Instagram for sure. And you can find posts and or stories to where you can get that link. Get subscribed if you're anywhere in the area. Even if you're not a member of their guild, check it out. There's going to be a symposium and an expo. Okay? Yeah, 59-year-old brewer life. They get naps. I believe that, Jamie Tripp. You deserve them. Also, I will be in Dayton, Ohio for the OCBA conference, January 26th through the 28th. Register for them. I'm going to be there. I'm going to see ya. Let's learn some stuff. AdamMakesBeer.com is now live. Stay up to date on all of the AMB happenings. Contact me. Dig into my blog content. You need services, we got services. Advertising your products, making behind-the-scenes promotional content for your brewery, consult services for your brewery and planning. Just got back from Boston doing one. What? It was awesome. Or a hands-on audit of your brewery SOPs. Do you want me to make video SOPs of your processes? Hit me up. If you are in need of my consultation services or anything like that, please let me know. Had a blast out in Boston. Your boy got in late on Monday. I flew back to the city with no pity. I got back at 1 a.m. Flight was a little bit delayed, but all in all, it went smoothly. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah, so if you need stuff like that, hit me up. If you are looking for more time with your boy, check out the Small Town Guys podcast. Typically, we roll Thursday evenings at the beginning of Thursday night football, but I have another podcast coming out, folks. Something that is not beer. So if you're here for the beer, I get it. City with no pity has to be an Ohio thing. I made it up. Well, I didn't make it up. It's actually there's a rapper that I like from Oakland, named Bamboo, Bambu, and he calls Oakland the city with no pity. And I also believe he did not originate it either. I just love saying the city with no pity. Good to see you in the chat, though, man. I am starting another podcast called the Waiting Since 57 podcast. If you are a fan of my beloved Detroit Lions, you will know that we have been waiting for a championship since 1957. So it is going to be just a straight up sports pod that I'm going to be doing. It's going to be weekly game breakdowns and more. The first live stream pod, so I'll be live, is going to be going on October 28th. Tuesday next week at 7 p.m. We're going to be talking the bye week, all that stuff. You should follow both Waiting Since 57 on Instagram and check it out on YouTube as the same channel, Waiting Since 57. And the same thing for Small Town Guys. Small Town Guys is getting its own channel and it has its own IG. So check us out there. Check us out there. I've been enjoying doing some different content stuff. I've been doing Small Town Guys with my buddy Stu and Jer, and it's been a lot of fun. And I've also felt as if it's been kind of sharpening up my game here on the streaming side, podcasting side of things. And so that's one of the reasons that I've thought about doing something on the Lions. I picked the Lions because I'm a huge NFL nerd, a huge Lions nerd. I really like the numbers and the math behind the game, which is kind of funny because I'm not a math guy, but I love the analytics and the stat tracking behind all that. And I think it'll be a good time if you're into that sort of thing. I am. So if you are into that, Check it out when that stuff posts. Again, follow across whatever platforms help support your boy. Let's give a shout out to my beautiful sponsor. Starting a brewery is a big step. Blickman Engineering is here to help. Oh, I'm using a new thing. I'm using a teleprompter thing. So hopefully I'm looking at the screen a little bit more. Let's see, maybe I'll move it over here. Starting a brewery is a big step. Blickman Engineering is here to help. Since 2006, they've equipped hundreds of nano breweries for success. Their new 3.5 barrel Pro Surface electric brewing system cuts maintenance and saves at least 30 minutes per brew day with powerful under kettle heating. From 1 to 15 barrel brew houses to keg washers and grain mills, Blickman has what you need. Ready to go pro? Contact Phil or Tom at proseries@blickmanengineering.com. Blickman Engineering is a proud sponsor of this channel and loves to help brewers at every stage of their journey. Love it. Yeah, show some love to my people over at Blickman. And if you are interested, I want that banner up and I want this not playing anymore. Kapow. Show them some love. If you need anything on the homebrew side, pro side, and there's even kind of some crossover stuff. I've got there on the pro side, I used to use their oxygen regulator for my O2 knockout post Heatex. So anyways, I should not be drinking more coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel as if I'm approaching a kidney stone again. But I'm just out here playing the game, you know? Don't hate the player, hate the game. And it just so happens that it appears as if my game is getting kidney stones. The stream on Instagram lags behind slightly. And so I have a separate chat right next to me, the window right next to me. So I can see what I'm doing earlier. And then when I had my hands up and stuff, I could see myself on the side doing it. And for some reason that snapped me back to reality and let me know that I should not or ever be doing that again. We've got Math How in the chat. We got a boy, 7 Point, and we got Mr. Fox. Good to see you, Mr. Fox. You've had a rough season for fantasy, but I love that you're on your grind, man. We're all just out there trying to get better. Who else? Over on Instagram, I currently just mashed in for an almond blonde ale, second recipe I have ever written. Slow guy, love it. Give me some details if you like. Let me know what you have going on, and I'm always interested, especially in how or when you are utilizing these almonds. Beergram, good to see you. Cheers to you. Hope to see you on our system soon. What do you mean, Beergram? I have to check it out. I'll check out your Instagram, brother. All right, now we've got some stuff to get to today. This is one that I am pretty excited about. I need to zoom back in. It's been a rough week. We'll need to win. Yeah. It's getting down there, man. We're about halfway through the season. But listen, ladies and gents, you're not here to hear about my fantasy football team, where, quite frankly, in the Adam Makes Beer Fantasy League, I've been lucky so far. I've not had a lot of points scored against me. I've not scored a lot of points compared to my place in the league. So, but I don't know if any of my LOJ friends are out there, but if you are, I'm in good shape in that league and I'm kind of crushing. So I feel really good about it. First question from the chat. Pray for our country. Ask the question. I saw your recent Amber Lager video. Thank you for watching. Do you ever sparge your roast malt or just include it in the general mash? That's a technique that I will use at sometimes that I could use. Maybe I have before, maybe I haven't. The idea is, you know, kind of discussing maybe a little bit of like a mash cap. So you run your standard mash, and then when you're getting ready to sparge, you could sprinkle your crushed roasted grains across the surface of the mash bed and then sparge through that, theoretically rinsing more color and less flavor and potentially less astringency. I don't have any problem doing that. I've done it on the home side. I'm positive I've done it on the pro side. Most often, I would think about it in a way like if I were doing, maybe it's a technique I would leverage if I was looking to really gain a depth of color in a beer without a tremendous amount of roast character. So maybe you use like a Carafa special type from Wireman, so a dehusked roasted malt. And rather than it just sit in there the entire time with that mash, cut down that contact time and just be sparging through it. In general, I just add what I'm going to add. In that amber lager video, you know, when I do those, when I do my own brew day videos like that, I don't want to be making a video where I'm like, here's the way to make amber lager, because first of all, that's not the truth. It's how I'm making amber lager at that time. And I don't ever want to come off like the definitive thing, right? But so when I was kind of thinking about these videos when I first started the channel, I'm like, okay, so what is like the big picture lesson or story that I'm trying to convey when I'm making these brew day videos? And a technique that I like to use is utilizing small amounts of roasted malt in order to build a depth of color in beer, especially with amber beers, or just give a little edge to something of color. And leveraging roasted malt is one of the ways that I like to do that. It just sounded like something made a weird sound in here. It sounded like a robot mooed or something, like a cow would moo. Anyhow, hopefully you, well, maybe if you did hear it, maybe it would mean that potentially I'm not crazy. So yeah, that mash capping type process is something that you could do. I usually don't do it. More often than not, I'm just going into the mash during the standard mash-in with my roasted product. In general, if I want the roast malt character and some subtle flavor, I will use the dehusked versions of malts. So that's kind of the way. I don't have any problem with it, but that's kind of my take. PFOC. I just abbreviated your name, man. I appreciate the question. Ill-gotten grains. Good to see it in here, my friend. Made a toasted cashew / marshmallow stout, and despite doing a tincture, head retention dissipates quickly. Anyway, to get more oils out of the tincture. By the way, the stout came out great and carbonation was on point. Okay, so one of my concerns with both of those things. So when using cashews, they do have fat / oils, whatever, lipids, if you will. And you can be introducing lipids to your beer, which can inhibit foam stand. Okay, so I think that one makes sense. He made a tincture, and I'm guessing that this marshmallow was also part of that tincture. Anytime that and maybe not, I would also think that potentially those marshmallows are a source of foam loss as well. Okay. It's one of the reasons why there's a trade-off. I think sometimes you can get some really nice natural extracts, and you will probably not hurt your head retention with that. I think if you're reasonable and you layer flavors whether that be with some real product. So in this case, some real actual almonds, and then some high quality extract on top of that to layer to magnify the aroma a little bit, to round it out a little bit. I think that's a fine way to do it. But yeah, it can get tough. I think you can also build those flavors into the grist when you're talking about like almond flavors, nut flavors, things like that. You can actually try to build that out a little bit through your grist and some specialty grains to kind of build off those things. Yeah, I don't think there's, to my knowledge, I don't know of any way to kind of defat that tincture or anything like that. Yeah. You might be able to find yourself like an almond powder situation, which might be lower fat. You might be able to search into that a little bit. Mathau talks about high proof rum, and vanilla beans might bring out some of that marshmallow safer than actual marshmallows. Yeah, there's some different ways to bounce around those things a little bit. But yeah, man, that's probably what's driving that foam loss, like you figured. But as far as pulling those oils out of the tincture, I'm not sure. But yeah, potentially you might be able to find a lower fat form of almond to work with. So yeah. Marshmallows added to the boil. You're a wild man. Still, that could also be part of that, because in general, there's all sorts of things. I don't know if you went store-bought or whatever. The range of chemicals inside food chemicals that are in those things, I'm not always certain about. And I could be wrong, but that would just be one more area where I would, think about and consider. But I appreciate the question, Ill-Gotten Grains. Dude, we're already jumping. I got this little banner at the bottom of the stream right now. You know what I mean? Letting people know what the deal is. So what I have for you is I am going to be taking questions from the chat. But I have kind of 8 points. So if you're a fan of the Small Town Guys pod, 8 pillars, if you will, the foundation of what I believe in as a brewer when it comes to recipe creation. Now, here's my disclaimer. This is what I do with recipe creation. I don't think that I am the greatest author of beer recipes on earth. I'm always trying to learn new stuff. But I do take this very seriously, and I believe on some level I have some acumen for it. That has grown over time. Experience always helps. And I think this is one of these issues where sometimes brewers need to kind of get over it. I'm not a fan of proprietary recipes or anything like that. I just feel like, because dude, where did your recipe come from? Oh, I'm guessing every single recipe you've written, you took Ray Daniels designing great beer, and you did all your math by hand. You calculated your IBUs by hand. Good for you, man. That's awesome. If that's you, that's awesome. I'm really excited for you. I think the majority of people, and I mean, I know plenty of pros, it's like the stuff that they're brewing at their new place, it's just stuff they hijacked and tweaked from their last job. So the kind of notion that we all, oh my gosh, somebody just texted me, and I think they might know that I'm live right now, and they're sending me nonsense. Phone is being turned over. We've all learned this stuff from somebody else. I think we need to be a little less pretentious with how we write recipes and everything like that. I do think that being able to write your own recipes is something that can help create stability for you in this industry and help this be a career. I'm not saying it's going to make your career or whatever, but it is one more thing in your professional tool belt that can help create longevity for you. And you may enjoy it. Different things like that. So I have these kind of 8 points, and I called them 8 pillars, but they're not really 8 pillars. These are 8 points that they're my viewpoint on how I work with these things. And some of the stuff I might, there was one thing I wanted to Google that I'm forgetting, but we'll work our way through it, folks. But this is the stuff that I've put together over the last 14 years. And my goal is, with a podcast like this, I want to help you have a better understanding of how I build these things. And if there's anything that you feel as if you might be able to incorporate, or it can give you a different viewpoint on how to look at something, hopefully there's value there for you. Okay. I hope so. I sure do hope so. A lot's riding on this. That's not true. There's really not much at all riding on this, other than the fact that you guys won't enjoy the podcast if it's not good. So yeah. It's ridiculous. Here's one of my first points, ladies and gentlemen. Point 1. Why is it important to build recipes using percentages? I am a huge fan of writing recipes in percentages. I do not have a problem with you actually writing down the actual poundage or kilograms of malt that is going into your grist. I think that's great. This is just talking grist. I'm not talking hop additions or anything like that. You don't need to create percentages of what percentage of your hop bill that is. Just for the grain bill, I find it to be very, very useful. Using percentages is the universal way to show your numbers when you are sharing a recipe with someone. Metric or freedom units does not matter. It helps you put your builds, your grist builds, into buckets like base malt, crystal caramel malts, roast malt, adjuncts, etc. That's the lens that I like to look at when I'm building out grists for various styles. I do think it's important that you get accustomed to different styles, all that stuff, but I like to have percentages for what each one of those individual buckets is making up when I am putting a recipe together, or when I'm looking at a recipe of a friend or colleague. In my mind, it is the cleanest way to scale recipes on the grist side. I think that I've seen there's very little stuff that I was doing at home on the grain side that I was not able to almost essentially do a direct scale up when it came to grist. When it came to grist, don't get at me in the comments about the hopping side of things. We can talk about that later. But when it comes to grist, for what I've done for a lot of things is I have scaled recipes up directly and then rounded down on the specialty malts to make it easily measurable or something like that, whatever it is, depending on what size, what size brew house you're on. I don't like to have a whole lot of partial bags around, maybe I'll do a half bag here or there or something, but I don't know. Yeah. But I do think it's the cleanest way to scale recipes. So in my mind, it's the cleanest way to talk recipe and the cleanest way to scale recipe. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. I've kind of had, it's kind of allergy season here, folks. It's kind of allergy season. We're getting cold. It's It's been cold and windy today, and I had to eat warm, cold weather food today to make me feel better. But yeah, this is why I use percentages. Okay. I think you should get used to looking at it like that. Because when you have those buckets, you can understand what you want to be accomplishing with different beers. In general, like my baseball malt bucket is going to usually be, it's almost always 80 to 100%, or most times 80 to 100%, maybe sometimes 70%, depending on what it is. I don't use a lot of crystal malt or caramel malt, whatever you would like to call it, whatever you're most comfortable calling it. So yeah. Like in my mind, I know percentages that I like to have for roast malt. Like in with when I'm brewing stout, just off the top, I like to use like 8 to 12% roast malt. Various types, blending them in there, whatever. And 8 to 12% based on the residual sweetness in that beer. The more residual sweetness, the more roast I feel like I can have in there. So just as an example. Usually I don't like using more than 10% crystal in anything, or even less. I don't use a lot of crystal. It's a good way to think about, like when hazies, when people started firing out those hazies, people always try and think, well, what's the grist that we need? And so, in my mind, I'm like, all right, I want 25% blend of probably malted wheat, flaked oats. Give me some base malt in there. Let's make some beer. Okay. Things like that. That's why I love using percentages when I'm writing recipes. So this is one that I need to double check. And I would actually, maybe I will ask somebody in the chat. If there's somebody live right now that wants to look up for me like the typical diastatic power so the typical DP in like Pilsner malt and the typical DP in like an 8 Lovibond Munich malt, I would love to have those numbers if you could please. But otherwise we'll figure it out when we get there. That was something that I wanted to reference. But before I can get to that, I've got Seven Paint Boy in the chat, the man, the myth, the legend, one of the OG channel members. Love that. Speaking of which, my boy is making some NA beers with one of those NAB yeast strains or whatever. We'll have to figure it out. I'm gonna have to see if I can get him. I'm gonna have to see if I can get him back on the pod. That's right, teaser. If I can get him back on the pod. Jamie Tripp, Channel All-Star. Can you speak about hops in the mash? Mash hopping is an interesting thing. If you look at the work that Scott Janish has done over the years, or work that Scott Janish has helped to bring to light over the last couple of years, he talks about some various advantages or benefits of mash hopping. I think when I first started homebrewing, the line on mash hopping was, mash hopping will get you a smoother bitterness, or maybe a smoother hop flavor. I mean, maybe if you're making something very, very gentle, there is the argument that these hop compounds may be bound in the mash at that temperature. It's kind of a similar argument for first wort hopping, that potentially there are hop compounds that will get bound at that temperature range and can then be released later in the process of fermentation. But there's other angles on this now too. Scott Janish has talked about increased shelf stability with mash hopping, and this might be ugly when I say this, but so this isn't. But I think it was something about helping to pull metals out of solution, which those metals can lead to whether premature or whatever, but premature oxidation. Nobody wants that. So there's some benefits there. And kind of the third one is with some of these thiolized strains, some of these strains that are genetically engineered to get these thiols to express. You'll see some aggressive mash hopping with those. So you're kind of loading the kettle with precursor, eliminating the green matter from the process, because the green matter is actually going to, whether it be degrade, drop them out, whatever it is, diminish the impact of that thiol expression in that beer. So that's one of the reasons that you would have it on that side. But yeah, I mean, that's some of the reasons that people mash hop and things like that. I can say I do have some experience utilizing things like that on the thiol side. It's interesting. It is absolutely interesting. Whether you like that profile or not, that's kind of up to you. I have done some stuff on the thiolized yeasts, and there's probably a decent amount of information out there on that. So, but yeah, that's some of my take. I don't do a lot of mash hopping in general, Jamie. Okay, I got pray for our country back in here. Let me hit up this diastatic power question though. Let me see real quick. Oh, I don't want to lose that. Okay. Thank you for your patience, people. Let me dip in right over here. This next one that I want to talk about is, after percentages, I want to talk about why is the color of your base malt important to your recipe writing. Now, that might seem strange, but remember when we were talking about these percentages, these buckets, when we are writing the grist portion of our recipes, the base malt bucket is interesting because you are not just laying a base flavor for your beer, which you are, but your base malt is going to have another very important function, being that your base malt is the actual driver of converting starch to sugar or saccharification in the mash. Okay. Stevant from Brewers from city of Siberia, Nis, Serbia. Well, that's still wild. Welcome. Good to see you. Gosh, that's such a bonkers thing that we do here on the internet. So awesome that you're listening. Let me know if you have any beer questions. Just either way, good to see you. That's so cool. So the color of your base malt, though, is a big deal because your base malt is the thing that is holding your enzymes or contains your enzymes that's going to convert that mash. Now, your other malts, your caramel malts, your roasted malts, they don't have those things going on. Adam, but why? Because they got burnt. Okay, they've been denatured through the malting process, through the toasting, roasting, kilning, stewing, not the stewing, but you know what I mean? Those higher temperatures, anytime that it's experiencing something above that temperature range, which is really, you start getting into the 160s, 170s, those enzymes are going to be raging on their last legs, right? Before they stop doing their work. But so that means typically, and depending on how modified or how modern of a malt they're trying to make, or how under modified malt they're trying to make, the paler a malt is, the more enzymatic power or diastatic power that it will have. Okay, sometimes that's also listed as DP. So typically your Pilsner malt is going to have more enzymatic power, or DP, than your Munich malt. They are both base malts, especially that Munich is in like that, 7 to 8 love range. If you're EBC people, just double it, baby. I think that's right, isn't it? Just double it, basically, kind of the dummy math on that. So the reason why this is important is if you are building out a beer and say you want to go really Munich heavy, and you are going to making a big giant Doppelbock, and you want it to be like 90%, and you want it to be 90% Munich malt, and it's even darker than like an 8 love Munich malt, like it's a darker Munich malt. You might not have enough enzymatic power to get that done. Okay. Now let me see if this little search that I did helped me out for ranges. I forgot to do my notes on this, folks. I apologize. So yeah, specifically diastatic power is a measure of malt's enzymatic strength, specifically its ability to convert starches into fermentable sugars. What? It's like I said that. What it means typically. Okay, so American 6-row can typically have a DP of 160 to 180. That is banging. And if you think about it, the reason that is American 6-row was used, or was typically historically used a lot in these high adjunct lagers. And so the more adjuncts that you have that do not have diastatic power to help convert their starches, you need to make up for it with another base selection. 2-row pale can be 120 to 160. You're gonna have no problem converting mashes with things like that. But some continental pilsners can start getting lower depending on the modification of it. Sometimes they can be from 90 to 120, and this is just all general range stuff, you guys, right? But here's the thing: you go from these pale malts that have really anywhere from 100 to 180 DP, and you go to maybe an English pale ale or a Maris Otter, and that might drop down to 40 to 70. A Vienna or a Munich may only have 20 to 50, and this is going to be all maltster dependent. Always be reading your sheets, okay? So it's things like this where there are times where I will blend base malts. And so it might sound weird if, maybe you want like a big, rich barley wine or something like that, but a higher ABV beer. And you want to make sure that you are getting as much of those starches converted to sugar as possible, which is what you always want to be doing. But, folding in a percentage of Pilsner malt into a beer that is featuring, like a Maris Otter, might not be the worst idea. If you're struggling from a diastatic power standpoint, from an enzyme standpoint, yes, there's, exogenous probably isn't the word, because I think that's outside the body, but you want it rolls for this purpose too. I think there are, you could use just like enzyme out of a bottle, to pour that in there, sure. But you can also kind of blend those things up a little bit too. I think that's another perfectly good way to do that. So why this matters? Yeah, just a couple other notes on this. All malt beer, you can get away with lower DP, 50 to 100, since all the starch comes from malted barley. Adjunct brews, corn, rice, oats, you might need higher DP total across your total average across your grist of 120 or more to have enough enzymatic strength to make sure that you're breaking down that corn, rice, oats that does not bring enzymes to the table itself. So yeah. Anyways, that was one. It's kind of a blending in a higher enzymatic malt is kind of a little. It's kind of a little old school. I guess it's not an old school hack, but it's like an old school approach, right? Because if you don't have fancy enzymes on hand and you really want to make sure that you're going to be getting good conversion with that thing, maybe blending some of that in some of that higher DP malt can help you in that situation. So that is why the color of your base malt can be important to your recipe writing. Hop Fisher, good to see you in here, man. Hey, Adam, I've been a lurker for a while. I met you back at the beginning of the year at the Ohio Craft Brewers Conference and chatted for a bit. Loved all your videos and the shorts. Thanks, man. I will. I'm not sure. I'm not sure your name, because it's Hop Fisher on here. But anyways, are you going to the conference again? Make sure to give me a shout. I'll be there. I'll be there doing my thing, hoping that the festivity things have cocktail options, because your boy don't drink beer. So yeah, I appreciate the kind words, though, man. I appreciate the kind words. Okay, so a couple of questions from Ill-Gotten Grains. He asks, another brewing question. I plan on cloning Sierra Nevada Torpedo. Magnum whole cones are called for. How different would it be if I use pellets? I have the recipe from Sierra Nevada. It's got to be something other than Magnum in there, though, right? You probably got some classic C hops. I personally would try to get the highest quality. I would try to get the highest quality version of the hops that you can. I would prioritize that over whole cone. If you just want the experience and you're doing it for the experience and you're like, let's do it with whole cone, baby, let's do it with whole cone. That's great. But if you're trying to make the best beer that you can, I wouldn't sweat the whole cone to pellet thing. I would focus on getting the best hops you can in whatever form. So yeah, so it's Magnum. Okay, that's crazy. That's crazy. I figured there would have been a C hop in there somewhere. In regards to high ABV beer, should we make a yeast starter, or is there a dry yeast suitable for high ABV? Yeah, I mean, depending on how high you want to go, I think dry yeast is a perfectly fine way to do that. I would check out the interview that I did with, well, actually both of them. My boy from Escarpment, Richard Priest, and then Dr. Matt Winans from Fermentus. Check them out. We talk dry yeast and we talk dry yeast and rehydration. And particularly in relation to high gravity worts. So you might want to go ahead and dig on that a little bit. There was a lot of stuff out there in the early days for me, where they would say that you needed to rehydrate your yeast, and otherwise you would have 50% mortality when it was sprinkled on top of the wort dry. That was referenced from the yeast book from the Brewers Association. I've always wondered on that because, I've heard some people on the dry yeast side say, who wrote that book, and it was, a white and a Zana chef. But, one of those guys runs a liquid yeast company. So I'm not saying that the research isn't real, but what I am saying, there is tons of research and data that supports that when you add dry yeast to standard size worts, that it is not necessary to rehydrate. But however, the research that shows that 50% mortality tends to come more from the wine side, where those musts that they are creating are of a higher density, and that rehydration could be helpful in that situation. So yeah, I think that dry yeast can be great for that. I would check out dry yeast rehydration, looking to have a cooled, sterile water that you can rehydrate that in. Make sure to keep it covered. Do all sorts of things, do all your all your sanitation stuff really well. And yeah. Bro, I think I'm going to sneeze. Pray for our country with another question. What's better for dry hopping a hazy IPA, T90 or cryo? Yes. I think it is best. Oh, I think it is a good technique to use both. I have had some hazy beers that are all cryo. And by cryo, we're meaning that we have a higher percentage of hop oils, hop resins, and a lower percentage of green matter in those hops. And I think sometimes when you lean too heavily into those advanced hop products and remove too much of the green matter from your dry hop, from your Whirlpool editions, what have you, whatever, or from your process, you can miss some of the key balancing contributions that polyphenols can make for your beer. Okay, or can give to your beer. All right. So the upshot of cryo is you're going to have less loss, more oils and aromatics going in there, all good stuff. But they themselves tend to recommend getting a blend because you actually need some of that structure from the polyphenol. And this isn't the first time we're going to be talking about polyphenols, baby, or polyphenols, as I was just about to call them. So yeah, there's definitely some stuff in there. Electric Sunshine, yo, Adam, appreciate all the knowledge you drop on us. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's always nice to hear those things. Wonderful to see you in here. Ask questions, drop them along the way. Love to see what I'm assuming is your smiling faces. I'm just gonna say it. I'm assuming you're smiling because I don't think I could handle the disapproval. But yeah, PFOC. That's what I would be doing with that. Todd, TODD. What is my view on boiling with the lid on? Like I've had different situations with my kettle at work, where I've had some kettle situations where I can have the kettle closed and the stack handles the steam appropriately and takes it out. I've had some situations where the stack does not handle it at all. I've had situations where I can have the door open, I can have it closed. What's nice about having it closed is you're not having stuff fall in there. I've worked in some really old factories that were converted into breweries, and sometimes these little wispy, like fluffy blobs would fall down. And yeah, I mean, I would never want that going in the kettle, whatever that stuff was. Look out for that new guy at that brewery. But yeah. the idea is, you should be able to keep the door closed and not have boilovers or anything like that. You should have appropriate pull or draw off of your stack to not have to worry about that. So, that's my thought. I would rather not be dumping all that steam into the room I'm working in. You do need, appropriate lift out of that kettle to get that steam up and out. But yeah, I mean, that's my thought in general. That's my thought in general. I don't know if you were looking for a DMS angle on that or not, Todd. But yeah, as long as you have an appropriate pull coming out of that kettle to your stack, you're gonna be just fine. You're gonna be just fine, Todd. Appreciate the question. Coming from the land, baby. That's where half my family's from. Welcome. I don't know if I've seen you in here before, Todd. Welcome. Good to see everybody in the chat for all the questions that are pouring in. Yeah, and on that notion of pitching ferments dry, going up to like roughly 20 Plato, 1080, a lot of nutrients. Yeah. There's some different research out there. You know what I mean? If what you're doing is working for you, that's great. But yeah, I think it might have been Dr. Winans, Dr. Matt, that was talking some of that stuff too. Mash Bros Brewing says, thank you for your podcast. Listen to it on the way to work. Well, listen, hopefully, does anybody have the, I think I see younger people posting about the Sunday scaries on, Sunday on Instagram. Are those millennials that talk about that, or is it the group younger? I don't know. I don't have the Sunday scaries anymore, which is actually nice. But yeah, the chat's popping. Let's get in here. Who else? Dancing Squirrel, welcome back, man. Channel All-Star. I appreciate it. Appreciate your support. Yowdy. I see a trend of a lot of folks switching to chit malt over Cara pills, Cara foam. In your opinion, are the Caras legit, or is chit malt the way to go? They're all different tools, man. Let me see if I'm going to jump off camera for a second. I'm going to grab a book. Hold on. I think it's over here. Yeah. So, sometimes I feel bad that I don't retain all the information in my brain, or what used to be in my brain. But if I'm remembering correctly, the chit malt thing really started to pop because of this book. And Janice was talking about the benefits of chit malt. Chit malt. It is referenced a ton of times in this book. There's 8 different things in the index, at least. And if I'm just gonna go off the top of the dome with what I remember. Chit malt is an undermodified malt. It is partially modified, so you may be able to pull some body, and maybe there's some haze positivity with that as well. I may need to dig in on this a little bit again. I've used plenty of chit malt in those beers, especially in hazy beers, and I've been happy with the approach. Over Cara pills, Cara foam. So Cara pills is that's the really low Lovibond malt from Brice. And basically we're talking dextrin malts here, right? And typically low Lovibond. So Cara foam is quite pale as well. I just want to double check the stats on this. The product data sheet. Okay, yeah. So it says it's 2.5 to 6.5 EBC, which is 1.4 to 2.9 Lovebond. So very pale. Recommended 5 to 10%. You can basically use it in anything, they say. Made from the finest German quality brewing malt. Due to our specialized malting process, this malt is characterized by high proportions of dextrins and high molecular weight proteins. This makes Carafoam ideal for improving foam and its stability, as well as adding body to any beer. Due to the light color, it can be used universally, from darkest to lightest. They have the flavor wheel. Bless their hearts, man. These flavor wheels are pretty rad. The most intense flavors that you're going to get, which is only going to be 3 out of 5 according to this wheel, is you're going to get some sweetness out of it, maybe a hair of breadiness. But yeah, it's not supposed to be. It's not supposed to have a big flavor impact. More so in that direction of foam stability and potentially a little bit of sweetness. So I do think it's funny when you do the quick Google search, they do talk about chit specifically with hazies. But the AI overview here that I just pulled up quickly so I can give you something a little bit more than what I had to give you was chit malt is lightly malted barley. See, so we said under-modified, right? Used in brewing to enhance foam head retention, and mouthfeel without adding significant color and or flavor. It's popular for styles like German lagers and modern hazy IPAs, and it's typically used in the 3 to 10% range. I have heard sometimes that there's a joke that Germans actually call it shit malt because it's poorly modified malt. I don't know if that's true. If you're a German listener, let me know. That's just some of the stuff I heard on the streets. Okay, you know where I am. I'm on the streets. So, in my mind, the biggest difference between the two is I believe both Carafoam and Carapils are both caramel malts. They're very pale caramel malts, dextrin malts. And I've heard some people say that they don't like the flavor of Carapils. Like, I hear that pretty universally. I don't know. I've not used it enough. Sorry, I didn't see that cough coming. I would have muted it. Yeah, man. Some people swear that they can taste it and that is too much. They don't like it. That's and maybe I just haven't had, like I said, I haven't brewed with it in probably 20 years. Probably since maybe it's when I was homebrewing, I used it. And that's not a homebrewer Carapils knock or something like that. It's just the reality. I probably really haven't used it since then. Unless I was at a place where I was making somebody else's beers. But yeah, the chit malt is not that, and so you will not be necessarily pulling up the residual sweetness of that beer, and maybe it's a little bit more flavor neutral. But no, chit has been popping off a wee bit as the years go by, and I do think it's because of the lovely Mr. Janish and his book. Oh, ill-gotten grains. Don't worry, man. Never apologize for asking me questions. Dancing squirrel. Yeah, that's my take, man. You're welcome, dude. Todd. Yeah, man. I'm glad. Well, hopefully you're enjoying the live, because unfortunately, this is as good as it gets. Okay. You're welcome. You're welcome, everybody. All right. I'm going to jump back to one of my pillars with this question. Can I increase body without increasing the perception of sweetness in my beers? Why, yes. And we're going to talk specifically on the grist side of things. We're not going to be talking about enzymatic things, anything like that. We're just going to be talking about things that go into your brew house on brew day, on the grain side. Okay. How do I increase body without increasing the perception of sweetness? First of all, we need to divorce those two concepts in our mind. Sweetness and body. They're two different things. Sweetness and malty are two different things. Now, sometimes when a beer is sweeter, it can have more body. Sometimes when a beer is sweeter, it could magnify the maltiness, right? But words mean things. From the great Eric Fauch. Was that a Fauci? Was that a Faucianism? Esteban, you got to let me know. But words mean things. So can I increase body without increasing the perception of sweetness? A lot of times people say, well, I want that residual gravity high so I can really get that body jumping. You know what I mean? And sometimes that can be true. But ladies and gentlemen, I feel as if elevated, unnecessary residual sweetness, hot take, is the thing that's making our beers less drinkable in general. What's the thing that's stopping somebody from having 4 of the same beers from you, aside from ABV or anything like that? Generally, it's going to be the residual sweetness of the beer. If everything else is technically sound, lack of drinkability, in my mind, in a clean beer, is driven by excess residual sweetness. So, how do I manipulate body in a beer? On the grist side, what I like to do is sometimes people will say, well, you can mess with your mash temperature, boost that mash temperature up toward the top end of the scale, and you'll create longer chain sugars that will hold more body in your beer, and that can be wonderful. That's fine. But for me, I find on the grist side, a way to manipulate body is by use of certain adjuncts. Obviously, oats have taken the world by storm. Chip malt has been popping off, ladies and gentlemen. We just talked about that. But I'm a huge fan of flaked rye. Flaked rye, not malted rye. Malted rye gets very earthy to me. If you're one of those people that wants to get in my mentions about malted rye being spicy, baby, stop. Baby, stop. To me, it doesn't. I don't like that descriptor. When I taste that, in no way, shape, or form is it spicy to me. It's earthy. Okay, it's of the earth, the humus, hummus. Hummus is different. Humus, terra. You know what I mean? So, hold on just a second. With the new iPhone update, it's giving you like texts instead of voicemails. For all the people out there still leaving voicemails, I get voicemails from certain people of certain ages in my life, and the automatic transcription is not always the best. So sometimes it leaves funny notes. But so you can increase body by using some of those elements. For me in particular, I loved flaked rye. I've used flaked rye up to like 23% in a beer before. Careful on your louder. It was a beer called Big in Japan. Shout out Tom Waits. And some love to Andy Gallagher. The great and powerful Andy Gallagher, head brewer down at Linwood Brewing Concern in Raleigh, North Carolina. He and I used to make a beer called Big in Japan. It was awesome. It was when session IPAs were a thing, and we were looking to chase it. We were trying to drive up body to stand up against, this fairly firm hop schedule with this beer, because we wanted to have, you know, a sessionable IPA that actually drinks like an IPA. And I don't want to backpat. I guess I'm not backpatting because it was his recipe. But it was pretty good. It was one of the beers I'm probably like proud of from my time in the industry. You know, even though it's Andy's joint, it was a beer I loved making. I loved drinking. Super tasty beer. Kind of a product of its time. You know, thinking about you know, even the notion of session IPA, right? So, but yeah, that's a throwback for me. But we used to do a good amount of rye in that beer to help balance that. I don't find the flaked rye to be as flavor forward, but I find it viscous as a mug, baby. If you want to know what am I talking about when I'm talking about viscosity, and you actually want to be able to break it down on the way that it works on your palate, for me, you can obviously do the very clear, like, how does your tongue feel against the roof of your mouth? Okay, is there like some is there additional slickness, viscosity, slipperiness? I also notice it in a similar place on my palate as when I am picking up astringency. So when I pick up astringency, I can get a dryness in my mouth, and sometimes I can get a grippiness between my gums and lips. Okay, this might sound strange, but you get like a dryness or a grippiness there. That's the same place that I will pick up a more viscous beer. So if you have a big viscous beer, I can feel that. I can feel that between my lips and teeth, even, or whatnot. So yeah, probe around in there with your tongue in your own mouth, people, and see how it. You know, you can. It's one of the ways you can kind of feel for that, test for that. You know. The chat is popping. Thanks for all the questions, everybody. I appreciate it. As always, well, not as always, this is an AMA show. Ask me anything. Adam Makes Beer podcast. If you're just joining us, good to see you. If you have recipe writing questions, drop them in the chat. If you don't, you can just hang out and listen. If you have other questions, comments, or whatever, drop them in the chat, and we'll talk about it, man. We'll talk about it. Moving on. Because yeah, that was me wrapping up. Yeah, I'm just making sure I'm on track here. That was me wrapping up how it can increase body without increasing the perception of sweetness. Those some adjunct things. Flip side, you can utilize rice to drop body, right? Right. There's different ways to do that. We'll talk more adjuncts here shortly, people. Next pillar of foundational ideas for recipe development, at least for me. Why do you like to limit the amount of crystal/caramel malts in your beers? Because, man, I don't like residual sweetness in general in my beer. And you can say, well, this beer has, well, of course they have residual sweetness. Yes. My mustache is itching me, folks. I'm gonna comb it real quick. This is the longest, fullest my mustache has ever been. So if you're thinking to yourself, this guy's mustache is terrible, then maybe you're right. But here's the deal. You guys. I am trying to let this thing continue to grow for the Halloween edition of Small Town Guys, because I want to be a gunslinger. Okay. But so I had to trim down the rest of the beard because that was getting too long and bothering me. So I've had the mustache. Very few people have said anything about the mustache. I'm going to trim it down next week, I think, for the Small Town Pod cast. Small Town Guys. You're going to have to let me know what you think. My daughter came back from college and for the first time in her life thought maybe the old man's mustache wasn't a joke after all. Okay. So you're going to have to weigh in. Let me know in the comments, baby. And if you really hate it, let me know in the comments. I can take it. But why do I like to limit the amount of crystal malts in my beers? I touched on it a little bit before, but in my mind, the number one enemy of balance in a beer or lack of drinkability in a beer, as long as the beer itself is clean, is that it is built wrong. It has too much crystal malt and it has too much residual sweetness. Remember, crystal malt is completely non-fermentable, so every percentage that you put in there is slowly jacking up the residual sweetness in your beer. I'm not a fan of it. And it's kind of gone, it's kind of gone out of style a little bit by and large. You know what I mean? Like, it used to be back in the day when I first started homebrewing, it's like, dude, let's get all the crystal malts in there. And there's still times where I like to use them and I like to layer them, but yeah. That's why I like to limit them. A lot of times back in the day, I used to make a red ale when I was at Crank Airs, and that probably had 20% in it, and it was a lot. It did have some roast malt in there a little bit. I did utilize a little bit of late hopping too in that little late kettle hopping, but it was probably too sweet if I had to look back. It worked for the tap room, but sometimes people like sweet beer, and sometimes people just don't know what's good for them. And they didn't know they'd be happier if that beer was a little bit drier. So, anyways, but yeah, that's why I like to limit that. I think I've also heard some stuff about shelf stability in crystal malt. I could be wrong. It could potentially be oxidized or lead to oxidation. Fact check me, baby. Get in there and tell me when I'm wrong. I'm not completely sure about that last thing that I said, but let me know. Let me know. Oh, so Wendy tagged. So if you just post some David Hunter music. Hey, man. Good to see you, Wendy. Welcome. I don't know if you're actually still in here or not. But yeah, that's my thought on crystal malt, you guys. I don't use a ton of it. The last time I used a relatively heavy hand of a crystal malt was I was making a beer. Ooh, check out the Adam Makes Beer blog. It's over on Substack. Go to adammakesbeer.com, hit blog, and then I have a post on making really extreme aggressive hibiscus beers. And hibiscus brings a lot of it brings tannin to the table, and it brings acidity. So it really drops the pH of your beer. And I was looking for ways to kind of round out this really aggressive small hibiscus beer I was making. And I didn't want to just slap it with a bunch of lactose or anything like that, because that limits the number of people that can drink it. I did find a sweet little 3 Lovabond crystal wheat from my people at Malt Europe. And I think I maybe used up to 20% in that beer, but it was balanced with a fair amount of acidity. The thing the pH went down to 3 in that beer. What? So, it kind of works out a little bit, but that was a really low love crystal. To me, I use that like I would use simple syrup in a cocktail. You know what I mean? So yeah, if you can see, I feel like the camera freaks out sometimes with the colors on this logo on my shirt. Anyways, hey, Adam Makes Beer shirts in there, helping brewers grow. Show me some love. There's some merch. Do you want the Brew Daddy mug? My face on one side, Brew Daddy on the other. My kids made this for me, FYI. I would not. I had a dear friend of mine ask me, he goes, is Brew Daddy a direction you want to be going with your branding? And I said, no, not at all. That's mortifying. But this cup is funny. And it is one of the things that people tend to buy in the merch store. So if you're a weirdo, you can go buy it. But we have hoodies in there, all sorts of things. Even like normal Adam Makes Beer mugs. Check it out. Check it out. It's hoodie season, baby. Or maybe it's t-shirt season by you. 3-Notch Dave, what she's tagging everybody. Hello from Virginia. Hey, Wendy. Are you tagging people so people can see this? Is that how Instagram works, Wendy? You have to understand I'm 48 and I don't understand. I don't know how these things work. I'm holding on by a thread, by a technological thread, Wendy. But if that's what you're doing, if you're sharing this, so other people, like if you're sharing this with your people, love it. I hope 3-Notch Dave loves it. What else? What else? What were we talking about? Caramel malt and beer. Yeah, I think that's why. That's my deal with caramel malt and beer, and how I like to use them. Recipe creation AMA. Drop the questions. In general, how do I create balance in beer? Here's my next pillar, ladies and gentlemen. Here's my next pillar. Oh, you're tagging. Where am I located? I am in the greater Cincinnati area, Wendy. You're tagging Virginia beer people. That's awesome. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. I can act like a fool, but I mean, it really does mean a lot to me when people share this stuff. It's very much appreciated. Content creation is my full-time gig, you know? So how am I creating balance in beers? This is my checklist. First of all, we can think about, you've heard me talk a lot about residual sweetness, and that's actually point 2. But point 1, BU to GU ratio, or bitterness units to gravity units. I believe they talk about this in Designing Great Beers. And so let's think old school, okay? Don't get mad if I say that Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is old school, because it is old school. It's a classic. It's awesome. It's terrific. And these numbers might not be exactly right, but you get it, okay? BU to GU ratio, meaning that if your bitterness units match your gravity units. Now, those of you who are really big on Plato, and you think Plato is the only way to measure for pros, and if you measure gravity, you're some homebrew dude or whatever, take it easy. It's just density, baby. It's just density, baby. But we use gravity for this one. So, like, just say for argument's sake, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is a pretty bitter pale ale. And so just say for argument's sake, you have a bitterness of 50 in that beer. That's probably high. It's probably closer to 45. And your gravity is 1045. Okay, so that'd be a 1-to-1. You drop the 10 off, and so you take your, like a 1050 beer would be 50. So if you're doing 1-to-1, it would be 50 IBUs to 50 gravity points. Okay, and you're figuring out that gravity point just by dropping the 1.0 off of the gravity density thingy. Okay. Yeah, there's a metalhead brewer, the pro, and he's rocking. He's doing pro gravity, baby. Love it. But what you can do is you can look at different styles, even if you go to, whether it's a BJCP thing, whether it's a Brewers Association thing. You can look for a range, because it'll usually give you a starting gravity range or a starting density range and a bitterness range. They should line up. That should give you a feel of what the balance of that beer should be from a density to bitterness range. So that understanding BU to GU ratio will give you like your infrastructure, like your main framework. Okay. Now, how that bitterness comes across in a beer is going to depend on a lot of factors. Because I've heard, back in the day, I think I heard Jamil Zainasheff say, I can make a 20 IBU beer taste sweet as hell, or I can make it taste bitter as hell. Okay. And I believe it. I believe it based on how that beer is built. But in general, if you want to create balance and make drinkable beers, I like to be on the drier side. I like to minimize residual sweetness. And also, whether it's my palate or not, whatever, in general, I tend to be on the lower side of the bitterness scale for that style, because I think that's more approachable. if you keep that beer dry and on the lower end of the bitterness scale, it's going to drink so much easier for people and be more appropriate and be approachable to a wider range of people. Okay. So I don't think there's, like I said, we're all learning. I do think that this is something that I have a pretty good understanding of. I think if you go through and you were to taste a whole lineup of beers that I design in general, they're going to be approachable and they're going to be balanced. Okay. I personally think this is a really big key in order to do that, is minimizing residual sweetness. So making sure that the beer is on the lower end of that residual sweetness scale or range for the style, and kind of hitting the lower side, mid to lower side, but typically lower side of the bittering range for a style. That's how I like to roll. Those are the beers I like to drink, and consequently, they're the beers I tend to make. Another concept that I think is really, really important when generating when creating balance in a beer, a lot of times people think about the bitterness in a beer being the thing that balances the residual sweetness. And that is true. But ladies and gentlemen, there are other factors. There are 4 right here. Actually, one of them is bitterness, but be aware that these things also create balance in your beer. Roast character, acidity, bitterness, and I'm also throwing in yeast character here. And I'm going to ask you to stick with me on this one. Okay. So let's go through this. Let's go through this point by point. Roast character adds balance to beer. Okay. Even if it is simply the sharpness that comes from some of those roast malt characters, potentially from some of the acidity from those malts, because roasted malts have more acidity in them than non-roast malts, especially base malt. Whether it is the tannin / astringency that is pulled from those grains that contribute balance. The worst idea for a beer that I can think of, from me, a beer that I would not want to drink, is a beer that is really bitter, roasty, and sour. I think in particular, the next one that we talked about, roast character, in particular, the next one, acidity and bitterness do not go together. Preach it from the rooftops. They do not go together. And how do I know? Ask the Belgians. How about you ask those sour beer blenders, baby? When they're slapping around that goose blend, when they're blending up young and old lambic, do you think that they want a whole bunch of IBUs in those beers? Get out of here. They know they're driving balance with acidity and tannins in those beers because they are barrel aged, right? Barrel fermented as well. So roast character, acidity. Acidity is pretty obvious. I mean, think about your cooking, right? If something is too rich, you can cut it with some acid, whether it be a vinegar, an acidic wine. That's why you're splashing that. That's why you're splashing that white wine in that dish to help deglaze that pan, right? Get you a little acidity in there. So acidity is another one that can bring balance. It can be a balancing component. But when you put acidity and bitterness together, you get the harshest bitterness from my palate It's like bitter like aspirin, like you're chewing on aspirin, chewing them down. It's the worst. We're going to say, obviously, bitterness is in here, and we're just going to dump that one off the list because we've already talked about it. But the final one is yeast character. So think about Hefeweizen, some Belgian styles that have expressive yeast strains. Wit beer. For a lot of the beers that utilize these yeast strains, they're very much leaning on flavors and aromas to help create balance in that beer. And you're like, Adam, I don't think you're right. Well, brother, let me tell you this. For me, when I drink a Belgian strain that produces robust amounts of phenolics, that certainly creates balance for my palate. You know what I mean? I will also hate it because I hate phenolics. I'm just really sensitive to them. I don't know why, but they drive me crazy. They smell like plastic so easily. They smell like plastic so easily. Listen, thank you. My wife is a gem. Okay. She's making sure I get, listen, it's part of the job. I'm in front of the camera and I'm spitting words into the internet ether. And you need drinks when you do that. And I was just about down to low on my coffee, and she came in. She grabbed some seltzers from the store. She knows how I roll, baby. Hey, Adam, how come it seems like you're drunk on the stream? I don't know, homie, because I'm drinking coffee and lemon lime caffeine-free sparkling water from Crochet. All right. So definitely doesn't hurt my feelings when people tell me that in the comments. What else? Oh, yeah. We were talking about yeast character. Belgians, half wit. I do believe, aside from acidity, because acidity can be yeast-driven as well, I do think some of those real character-driven beers, yeast-driven beers, can also contribute balance to the beer. Not that it's doing the exact same thing, but I do think if you have sweetness on one side and then balancing factors over here, yeast character, it can go on that side. It can go on that side. All right. So it can help in some way, shape, or form, in some cases, to creating balance in your beers. So all that said, one thing I really want to encourage you to do, if you're not doing this, everybody, with your finished beers, get your finished beers in front of you, measured amounts, titrate out some acid into them. And let's just say, for argument's sake, your beer is at 4.4. Drop it to, with lactic acid, drop it to 3.3. Make sure to mix it, appropriately mix all that stuff. 4.3, 4.2, 4.1, 4, 3.9, 3.8. And sample them. Smell them. Notice what happens to the foam. Taste them. I think some of the intangibles in your beer, if you are making clean, balanced beer, technically clean and balanced, and you're looking for some of those next intangibles, and you got your yeast stuff dialed in, your fermentation's on point, you're clean, you're sanitized or sanitary. Start looking at finishing pH. I'm a big proponent of that. You might be able to find some magic in manipulating that. So check it out. Check it out. Welcome, everybody. If you're just joining us, an AMA recipe writing podcast. I'm telling you all my thoughts on how I write beer recipes. You can drop questions in the chat. As always, we're grateful to have you here, learning along with all of us, because we're all here trying to get better. Next pillar that I would like to talk about when it comes to recipe writing is yeast selection. When we were talking about breaking beers into grist, and like into different grist buckets, percentage buckets, I move my hands and arms a lot. I similarly, uh, I will kind of bucket off the way I look at my various yeast strains. And some of you may hate this. You might hate the words that are about to come out of my mouth, but ladies and gentlemen, I can't help it. It's the truth. In general, in a production setting, I am not using a ton of different yeast strains. One of the things that went by the wayside when I was brewing at home to brewing professionally all those years ago was I had to reduce the number of strains that I was using because it's not financially practical without being able to repitch X number of times or not having the appropriate QC things at my fingertips to make sure that I was doing things well, things like that. So over the years, I think in general, people, when you are brewing on the pro side, you are looking for ways to, at least for your primary production beers, keep as few yeast strains in-house as possible. When I think about yeast selection for beers, I usually think about three things in today's day and age. I think about a clean ale yeast, I think about a lager strain, and I think about a hazy English strain. People sometimes would say a hazy strain, but let's be real, they're English strains, people, more often than not. And basically, so like when I was at Cartridge, I would have a clean ale strain in house, and it would either be dry 05, so like Chico from Fermentis, or it would be even 04. And I know that's more of a British one, but I've played with that and made that one run clean. So sometimes I view those dry strains, those two bricks that I would throw into a 15-barrel batch for a fruit beer, because I did a lot of fruit beers. I did IPA, I did hazy IPA, which I would do with my hazy English strain. I would do my lagers. And then really, other than that, I mean, the majority of the stuff that I was using, I would use my hazy strain for. But I was usually looking for ways to propagate that. And so if I was just going to do a one and done burn on yeast, because I don't like repitching adjuncted fruited beers and stuff like that, I would just throw some bricks of 05 at something or 04 at something. And that would be, just my get it done ale strain. I would like to encourage you, there's a wide range of things you can do with ale yeast, especially the Chico based strains. You can ferment those. Very cool. If you're pitching cooler to get a cleaner beer, a more lager-like beer, I would be pushing up cell count. I would be making sure that I have a nice healthy pitch. I'd start treating it a little bit more like lager yeast, right? But with everything, you always want a healthy, appropriate pitch, right? A healthy, appropriate pitch, and making sure that I have my O2 on point and my nutrient on point. Speaking to the hazy English strains, you can make a ton of beers with that yeast. Okay, you can manipulate O2, fermentation temperature, and pitching rate to get different characters out of those yeasts. So just remember, there's always a range with these yeast strains, right? Now you can say, Adam, well, you're not going to get it done with any of those yeast strains with the Belgian. Yes, you're going to need some specialty strains. As we mentioned before, things like Hef, Belgian, Wit. I think you're going to be hard pressed to make suitable versions of those styles without those actual yeast strains. The way I like to approach yeast selection for some tart beers, I know they have like the Philly sour type strains that if you're doing like those lactose bombs, fruit bomb, puree bombs kind of thing, you can get a light level of acidity out of those using those, clean cold side acid producing yeast. I personally think you probably need to give those things a shot of lactic on the backside if you want to get that tartness robust enough, but maybe that's just me. But yeah, that's generally how I think about yeast selection. I'm a huge fan, and I'm going to list not Omega, but I'm going to list strains from Imperial, because I was using Imperial the last time I was in charge of yeast purchasing, and I would use their Harvest Lager strain, which some people would refer to as also like the Augustiner. I love that strain. One of the reasons I love to use it is I think there's a wide range of temperatures that you can use it at. It's reliable. I think it has I think it complements malt very well. And I love so Harvest, and then what was Juice was the Haze Boy strain that I would use. And some other ales as well. But those were a few big ones for me. You can get charts and look up what they are for different yeast manufacturers, stuff like that. But yeah. Those are some of my thoughts on yeast selection when it comes to recipe creation. I've got I got a few more points. So if you have recipe questions, get them in, and I'll see if I can fit them in. And I've got like 20 minutes to keep me at about 2 hours, which I usually do. Which, when I say that out loud, it is crazy. It is crazy to be doing a podcast alone, talking for 2 hours. I'm not alone, though. I mean, here we are. Do you remember when Chappelle did the skits with the "Give It to Me, Baby"? Rick James, and they have the lights pouring past them. That's what made me think of. Next one that I want to talk about when I talk about recipe creation. Let's talk about the effects of hopping at various stages of the kettle. There's a range of information here. I kind of did a little brain vomit here. Speaking of which, my son puked after dinner. That's how much he loved my dinner. So I cleaned that up off the floor. Effects of hopping at various stages in the kettle. I think there are some antiquated terminology that is used around these. And it's not for about being like judgy or anything like that, but we try to use the words that mean the things when we're talking about beer. Bambino, what's good? What's good, Bambino? Good to see you in here. We try to use the words that mean the things. So sometimes people talk about bittering addition, flavor addition, and aroma addition. We'll address that. When I talk about a bittering addition, I am typically talking about a 60-minute addition. Sometimes people do their math different ways. When I say 60-minute addition or a 30-minute addition, 10-minute addition, that means that's how long that is being boiled for. So my 60-minute addition is being boiled for 60 minutes. Some people mean that they're 60 minutes or they're 60 minutes into the boil. That's not me, man. This is what I say. Maybe I shouldn't have put this cough drop in my mouth because I'm going to be like not sounding right. So anyways, when I do bitterness additions, I typically use a 60-minute boil for them. I usually use something clean and high alpha, like a Magnum hop. Sometimes I've used Warrior for that too, and sometimes my UK friends get very up in arms when I say that. But if you get a good vigorous boil on something, and you don't need a huge volume when you're going with a higher alpha hop, I typically like them to be low cohumulone, in the lower to mid 20s for cohumulone percentage, because that will lead to a smoother bitterness. And you're being, remember, I'm all about the smoothness, baby. I'm all about the smoothness. We've been listening to some of those AI versions, like blues versions of like 50 Cent songs. There's some smooth jazz voices in those renderings. For all these stages of hop additions, I think it's important to settle on a reliable bitterness calculator, or at least a consistent bitterness calculator combined with your palate to make informed decisions when creating the hop character you want in your beer. You know, I think kind of the days of saying, oh, this beer has 75 IBU in it. That's fine. I don't think it means anything. I mean, I'll be honest, when the last time I was making menu decisions at Cartridge, I would say the IBUs were what it tasted like. I mean, that's what you're really trying to get across to people, right? How is the bitterness perceived? So if there's 99 IBU in the beer, but it drinks like it's 35, then why would you tell somebody there's 99 IBU in it? You know, anyways, you're trying to let somebody know what they're going to be drinking. So that's kind of my take on it. So, you know, IBU numbers are a little bit wonky anyways. They don't necessarily translate explicitly into, you know, what you're tasting. So calibrate that with your palate and then adjust that up and down. Okay. Think about beers that you're making of a similar build from a density standpoint, residual density, similar grist. Consider things like that. Okay. So for all these stages of hop additions, settle on a reliable bitterness calculator combined with your palate to make informed decisions when creating the hop character you want in your beer. Next, I plan for almost all hop flavor to be gone by the end of the boil from bittering additions. I think if you have a vigorous enough boil, or at least the boils that I've had on the pro side, I have never made a gently flavored beer where I felt like I was pulling hop flavor or aroma out of the 60-minute addition. Now, there's some people on Instagram that want to get in my business about the way I add hops to my kettle. Okay. But if you can taste that Magnum hop edition, that 20 IBU Magnum hop edition, after that long, bless your heart, man. You're next level. You're next level. Somebody get CPAPs, Charlie Paps on the phone. Get him judging something, because this person's taking us to the moon. I plan for almost all hop flavor to be gone by the end of the boil from bittering additions. Notes. Low alpha hops. Sometimes I will use lower alpha hops, and this can be used to help facilitate clarity in lagers or lighter beers, or beers that you want to be clear. There is solid peer-reviewed research showing hop polyphenols strongly interact with wort proteins, and that those protein polyphenol complexes precipitate the chemistry behind cold/haze formation, and also cold break. Several papers and industry studies also show that different hop varieties vary in total phenolics. And some analyses report an inverse relationship between alpha acid percentage and total hop polyphenols. That combination is the basis for the practice that I'm describing here. Using a larger volume of low alpha hops early in the boil or as kettle additions increases hop polyphenol load and can drive more protein polyphenol precipitation during cooling, which can be leveraged to pull more haze active material out of solution for your final beer. Okay. So yeah, check that one out. That's something that I've leveraged. I actually just had a reel on Instagram about that recently, talking about that. So yeah. And actually I was turned on to that by my boy, Andy Gallagher. He learned that while doing some coursework at Siebel, because he's educated. Mid-kettle additions, or what sometimes people would historically call the flavor additions. Not a fan of it. Not a fan of the flavor addition title. These hops will still provide bitterness, flavor, and potentially some aroma. So if we're talking about hops in the, 30-minute to 10-minute range, Yeah, I can kind of see what you're saying. You can get some hop flavor out of that. I think their utility, though, these mid kettle editions, I think their utility lies in creating a more nuanced hop character between bitterness, polyphenol balance, and some flavor elements. It's nothing like a late kettle edition, however, as far as driving hop flavor and aroma. Don't kid yourself there. Don't kid yourself there. When I talk about that, a nuanced hop character between the bitterness and polyphenol balance, sometimes I've had some flabby IPAs where the balance just doesn't seem right, and maybe sometimes that mid kettle addition is missing some of that polyphenol contribution that actually it's not actually bitterness itself. Yes, you will get bitterness from those additions, but there's something additional. It's that polyphenol thing that creates some of that texture, some of that structure for that beer on your palate. Can help to create balance. And then we'll kind of talk about like the late kettle editions, flame out, whirlpool hops. Here's a key thing. Yeah, I mean, these are aroma additions, but they're flavor additions, and you're getting bitterness from them, especially the bigger your kettle is. If you're brewing on a 1-barrel kettle, a 7-barrel kettle, a 15-barrel kettle, 30-barrel kettle, it's going to hold temperature in different ways. It's going to take you varying amounts of time to get that wort out of your kettle. Okay, so there's a lot of things that come into play here. So with this flame out or whirlpool hop addition, so much depends on your timing, your duration of these things, the temperature of that kettle / whirlpool, the agitation. Your mileage will vary with these additions due to all those factors. In my mind, aside from dry hopping on the hot side, the primary driver of creating an intense hop flavor and aroma. The flame out whirlpool hops are the primary driver of creating intense hop flavor and aroma on the hot side of production. Obviously, dry hop is going to play a huge role in that too. Once again, focus when you're going definitely whirlpool and late hopping. It doesn't have to be everything, but do try to make sure you're giving a fair amount of focus to hops that carry high levels of survivable compounds. Check out that survivable compounds data sheet from Yakima Chief, I believe. It's been out there for a few years now, to say the least. Keep in mind when dropping the temperature on your whirlpool, whether that be because your kettle is not jacketed, believe me, it happens, or it's smaller, and so you're going to drop heat there. But dropping whirlpool temp from close to boiling at 211F or 99C to 170F or like 77C for these cool pool type approaches, or maybe your kettle just cools down because it's smaller. When you look at that on a hop utilization curve, on an isomerization curve, a temperature difference of that much can you can be generating bitterness at 50% less clip than you were at that higher temperature. Okay, so that is one of the benefits of doing that cool pool type application. Is it's a way of kind of maxing out that whirlpool for getting oils and whatnot, survivable oils and compounds into the whirlpool that will get into your fermenter, that will make it into your finished beer. That's kind of my thoughts around the flame out whirlpool hops. I'm usually not putting more than a pound per barrel in the whirlpool. I think you can kind of go too crazy. Yes, dropping pH helps as well. Yes, absolutely. Metalhead, thank you for that. So yeah, the flame out side of things, the whirlpool hops, That's kind of my thought. I don't think you need to go too crazy with them. But just from a recipe standpoint, this is where I'm, when I'm making IPA, whether it be West Coast, hazy, I'm getting, at least half pound to 3/4 pound to a full pound into those beers. Okay. Just some high level notes on hopping in these beers. The next thing we're going to touch on is utilizing sugars on the hot side and some of my big picture thoughts on that. There's a range of sugars that you can be using when it comes to recipe creation. Dextrose or corn syrup, corn sugar, corn syrup, rice solids, rice syrups, candy sugar or syrup, molasses, honey, lactose, maltodextrin. And I'm sure there's some I'm forgetting. There's a whole bunch. Use cases for these things. You can increase fermentability if the sugar is easily fermentable. Case in point, dextrose, corn sugar, rice solids. You can increase fermentability of your wort, meaning that you can decrease the body, make it drier, lighter on the palate. Everybody has their comfort range with some simple sugars. I've gone up, a lot of Belgians go up to 20%. I'd feel really comfortable going up to 10. One of my favorite ways of going from standard IPA strength to double IPA strength is just adding a requisite amount of dextrose on top of it to get me to the ABV I want, because I like to have crushable double IPAs. I don't like the additional body. I don't like the idea of making a double IPA that drinks more like a barley wine. I like drinkable IPA, double IPA. Okay. So you can do that utilizing those things. The benefits of some of this stuff, you can add neutral ABV, color, depending on like if you're using a candy syrup, a molasses, maybe a really dark honey. You can definitely get color, flavor. You can get increased body if you're adding something that is a non-fermentable sugar. Okay, maltodextrin, lactose, potentially molasses might fit into that too. I'm assuming some portion of molasses is unrefined density for that wort. But you can Google it, because I didn't off the top right now. Sometimes I don't know all the things I'm going to say, so I can't fact check everything I do before I get rolling. It can impact the perception of sweetness. Sometimes people think, oh, well, I'm adding corn sugar to this beer. It's going to make it sweeter. No, it's going to completely go away. All right. That is a fully fermentable sugar. But let's say you have some really baller, intensely aromatic honey that goes late into the kettle, so you're not flashing off all of your aromatics, or you're going wild and you're adding it to an active fermentation, something like that. I think you can add the perception of sweetness with some of these sugar adjuncts. Case in point, you could potentially add a sweet aromatic, a perceived sweet aromatic from using honey. Because if you can carry that honey aromatic, even though that will ferment, that can ferment all the way down, if you can maintain that aromatic, you can suggest sweetness to the brain. Okay? Even though it's 100% fermentable, it can add perceived sweetness, because if it's in a gently flavored enough beer, it may be able to translate in the aroma that honey and give some perceived sweetness. Now, small hack here. I love the idea of, if you are doing like a pale honey beer and you want to feature that honey, I love coupling it with chamomile, because I think a light touch of chamomile that floral. I think when you smell chamomile, to me, there's almost like a little honey aromatic to it. It's a way of like layering up that thing. And so even though like you're not trying to make chamomile the star, but you're using it in a supporting role to magnify the honey aromatic, I think that's a fun way to try to do that. Like the way you add vanilla to a chocolate chip cookie. That's not a vanilla chocolate chip cookie. It's just a chocolate chip cookie with vanilla in it, right? So you might be able to use that chamomile like that in that instance. I don't like to use lactose. I will if I'm making milk stout, cream stout, whatever. Obviously, cream stout. Those all through the same. That was my OG, one of the OG beer styles that I loved. I loved it, man. I had a Guinness before, and I was at a bar, and I was an adult male, and I was trying to convince people that I was masculine enough to drink Guinness, and I hated it. My palate wasn't built for it yet. It was bitter and dark, and it wasn't, Labatt or whatever I was drinking, or Coors. So yeah. But that cream stout style is just so approachable. That was one of my OG ones, Mackeson's Son, Left Hand. Shout out to those wonderful examples of that style. But in general, I don't use lactose where a lot of other people will use lactose, because I don't like to minimize the range of people that can drink my beer. If it has to be done, it has to be done. That's fine. I'd rather try to manipulate some things around it, even though lactose, I think, does give a character, especially at a certain percentage flavor-wise. Just a quick note, pardon me, on maltodextrin, and you can call me a maltodex hater. I've used maltodextrin. I've heard Janice using maltodextrin, and he'll bump up some of his hazy boys, and he feels as if it gets him there as far as creating the balance that he wants or emphasizing some additional sweetness. I've done that. I've seen the numbers that, yes, the density is there. I don't see it in the finished beer, though. And maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm not using enough. But I mean, I've pushed a beer up 1.5 Plato with dextrose. I mean, with maltodextrin, and it just didn't translate on the palate for me. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe you have your takes on maltodex. But yeah, let's see here. Yeah. My cliff notes on that, Beer Lover. Thank you so much for the question, Beer Lover on Instagram. How do I prevent my the haze in my IPAs from dropping out? You might have to do some conversions, because it looks like we're talking about on the homebrew scale. But one, you need to make sure that you are using a haze positive yeast. Check out Omega Yeast. Not that you have to use their yeast strains, but they will talk about haze positive yeast, and you can translate it to whatever provider that you use. So one, make sure you are doing that. Two, I like to have 20 to 30% combination of malted wheat and or oats in these beers. I think that can help. And then more often than not, keep all of your dry hop out of your fermentation until as close to the end of fermentation as you can. Some people even prefer a crash and dry hop after, and not sweating the apparently inevitable dry hop creep that may happen if they can keep that beer cold, and it's going to be gone quickly. You can reference my podcast on hop creep with the wonderful Jessica Young, off the top of my head. Jessica for sure. Young, I believe. There's a lot of names in my head, a lot of people I've talked to, but I believe that's it. So check that out. But yeah, and then make sure that you're dry hopping at least the equivalent of 4 pounds per barrel, if not higher. Okay. That was Scott Janish, directly from Scott Janish, his advice on how to make sure that your haze is staying in solution. Okay. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, man. Vessi vibes, or vessel vibes. I can't tell. My eyes are bad. Wow, cold crash, cold crash, and then dry hop. Check out the stuff that Janice does on it, man. Janish, last I knew, he was crashing down to 32 degrees or 0, getting as much yeast off of there as he can, dry hopping cold and blasting high volumes of CO2 through that beer to rouse it. So yeah, check it out, man. It's not for everybody. But obviously it's working for him. He's slinging those fat scores on Untapped. And obviously he's a G. I mean, he shares information. I love that about him. So yeah. But listen, as always, this was a blast. This is just some basic thoughts from me. I appreciate all the questions. I'm actually going to be working this into like a larger talk that I'm going to be pitching for the talk circuit in 2026. I would love to be getting in touch with various brewers guilds, state guilds around the country, or even international. But I would love to do more talks in 2026, and I'm going to kind of refine some of the things in this and expand on it to try to do some presentations on recipe development. So I'd love your feedback. Let me know what was helpful, what additional topics you would like to see. I always appreciate that. And I just got to tell you, it's so good to see so many people in here active in the chat. I love it. It's humbling. It's wonderful talking about these things with you all. The community that we have here, it's just really special to me, and I'm full of gratitude. So, anyways, the weather's changing. It's either getting colder where you are, getting warmer where you are. If it's getting colder for you and that tends to make you feel sad, that can happen to me. I'm going to try one of those sad lights this winter. We'll see what that does for me. But it's all part of it. Keep grinding. You're going to be good. Be close to your people. Treat yourself well. If you're getting into the warm weather, love it, embrace it, enjoy it. As always, check out adammakesbeer.com for all of your needs. Content, shop, services. We got it all, baby. Feedback in there too. You can drop stuff at me there. Remember to check out the other pods that I got going on. Small Town Guys, give us a follow on Instagram, Small Time Guys Pod. It's through my IG. And then check out if you're a football person, Waiting Since 57 on Instagram and on YouTube. We'll be firing that up. So in case you need a little bit more of me in your ears. Anyways, love to you all. Be good to your people, and we'll see you next time.
This feeling's deeper than an ocean, with a groove that's beating harder than my heart. So baby, now just hear me out. No, don't fear this emotion, 'cause you can't stop the fire. Why?